I was only 12 years old when we moved into that old, creaky house on Elm Street. It was a modest neighborhood, quiet and peaceful, with rows of charming houses lining the street. Our new home had character, a place where my parents thought we could build our lives. Little did we know our dreams would soon turn into nightmares. Our neighbors seemed friendly enough, except for one peculiar neighbor, Mr. Johnson. He lived right next door, in a dilapidated Victorian house that looked like it had seen better days. We rarely saw him during the day, but at night, strange sounds would emanate from his house. Footsteps that seemed to echo through the night, eerie whispers that chilled me to the bone. The first time I saw Mr. Johnson was on a bright, sunny afternoon. I was playing in the front yard when he suddenly appeared on his doorstep, like a shadow emerging from the darkness. He had long, unkempt hair, and his clothes looked like they hadn't been changed in years. But it was his eyes that sent shivers down my spine. They were cold, empty, devoid of any emotion. "Hello, young man," he said, his voice a low, raspy whisper. "I'm your neighbor, Mr. Johnson." I mustered a weak smile and introduced myself, feeling a deep sense of unease. He continued to stare at me with those soulless eyes, making my skin crawl. As the days turned into weeks, strange things began happening. It started with subtle occurrences, like objects moving on their own, and whispers that I could never quite make out. I told my parents about it, but they dismissed my fears as an overactive imagination. One night, as I lay in bed, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my room. I knew my parents were asleep, so I gathered the courage to investigate. I crept out of bed and tiptoed toward the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. The hallway was dimly lit, and I could see a faint, flickering light coming from Mr. Johnson's house through our window. As I approached his door, I could hear faint, mournful whispers. The door was slightly ajar, and I pushed it open just enough to peer inside. What I saw will haunt me for the rest of my life. Mr. Johnson was standing in the center of his dimly lit living room, surrounded by candles. His eyes were wide open, staring into the distance, as he whispered incoherent words. Strange symbols were drawn on the floor in chalk, and a book bound in leather lay open on a nearby table. I quickly retreated to my room, my heart racing. I couldn't explain what I had witnessed, but I knew it was deeply unsettling. The following night, the activity in Mr. Johnson's house escalated. Loud, unearthly screams echoed through the neighborhood, and the air felt heavy with malevolence. My parents, unable to ignore the disturbances any longer, decided to call the police. When the officers arrived, they knocked on Mr. Johnson's door, but there was no answer. They eventually forced their way inside, and what they discovered was the stuff of nightmares. Mr. Johnson was found dead in the same living room where I had seen him the previous night. His eyes were wide open, and his body was contorted in an unnatural position. The symbols on the floor had begun to glow, casting an eerie light across the room. The book on the table was filled with disturbing incantations. The police couldn't explain what had happened, but they assured us that Mr. Johnson's death was due to natural causes. They dismissed the strange symbols as mere decorations, but I knew better. After that night, the disturbances in our neighborhood ceased. The eerie whispers, the footsteps, and the unsettling presence of Mr. Johnson were gone. But the memory of those nights still haunts me. I often wonder if Mr. Johnson had summoned something from beyond the grave, something malevolent that was now free to roam. I can't shake the feeling that his death was just the beginning of a nightmare that would continue to haunt me for the rest of my life. To this day, I can't help but look at the old Victorian house next door and wonder what secrets it holds. I pray that whatever Mr. Johnson had unleashed has moved on, but deep down, I fear that it's still lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next victim. I was 13 years old when we moved into the old, creaky house at the end of Willow Street. The place had an eerie charm about it, the kind that made your hair stand on end, but I was too young to truly grasp the gravity of the situation. Our new home sat in the shadows of a towering oak tree, and the pale moonlight always seemed to cast strange, elongated shapes upon its aging facade. Our neighbors were an odd bunch, to say the least, but none more peculiar than old Mr. Harrington, who lived right next door. He was a tall, wiry man with a shock of white hair and a face etched with wrinkles that seemed to go on forever. His eyes were the strangest part, deep, sunken orbs that never seemed to focus on anything. Mr. Harrington was a recluse, and the locals spoke of him in hushed tones, referring to him as the cursed neighbor. My curiosity got the better of me, and one sunny afternoon, I decided to approach Mr. Harrington's house. The air around his property felt heavy, as if an invisible shroud of unease hung in the atmosphere. I cautiously knocked on his front door, and after what felt like an eternity, it creaked open.
"Can I help you, young man?"
he croaked, his voice filled with an eerie resonance that sent shivers down my spine. "I'm your new neighbor," I stammered. "I just wanted to introduce myself." His lips curved into a faint smile, revealing a row of yellowed teeth. "Ah, yes, I heard there were new folks moving in. I'm Mr. Harrington. Come in, come in." I stepped inside, and my eyes widened at the sight of his home. It was a labyrinthine maze of dusty books, strange artifacts, and dimly lit rooms. The air was thick with the scent of old leather and musty decay. He invited me to sit down, and we began to talk. As the weeks passed, I visited Mr. Harrington regularly. He had an uncanny ability to captivate me with his tales of the supernatural. He spoke of ghosts and apparitions, of cursed objects and haunted places. Every story seemed to breathe life into the very shadows of his home, and I couldn't help but believe every word he said. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in eerie shades of purple, Mr. Harrington beckoned me closer. He whispered of a peculiar mirror he had acquired many years ago, a mirror that had the power to reveal the secrets of the dead. He spoke of the countless restless spirits trapped within its depths, begging for release. His voice dropped to a conspiratorial hush. "Would you like to see it, my boy? To gaze upon the souls that linger in the afterlife?" I hesitated for only a moment before nodding eagerly. Mr. Harrington led me to a darkened room at the heart of his house. There, in the center of the room, stood the mirror. It was a massive, ornate thing, covered in strange symbols and carvings. My heart raced as I stared into its depths. Images began to form within the glass, distorted and ethereal. Faces of the dead appeared, their eyes filled with anguish and longing. They whispered incomprehensible words, their voices a haunting chorus that sent chills down my spine. Among them, I saw the faces of my own ancestors, their eyes locking onto mine as if pleading for release from their eternal torment. I stumbled backward, terror gripping me. "What is this? What have you done?" Mr. Harrington's eyes gleamed with a sinister glee. "I have trapped them all, my boy, and now you too shall join them." With that, he reached out, and I felt an otherworldly force pulling me towards the mirror. Desperation flooded through me as I fought against it, but I couldn't break free. I was dragged closer and closer, my reflection merging with those tormented souls. Just as I thought all was lost, a blinding light erupted from the mirror, and an otherworldly scream echoed through the room. I was thrown back, gasping for air. The mirror shattered into 1,000 pieces, and the trapped souls were released in a burst of spectral energy. Mr. Harrington's house trembled and groaned as if the very foundations of reality were crumbling. I watched in horror as the walls twisted and contorted, and the shadows came to life, clawing their way towards Mr. Harrington. He screamed in agony as they enveloped him, his form melting into darkness. In the end, the house itself seemed to sigh in relief as the malevolent presence that had haunted it for so long was banished forever. I stumbled out into the night, my heart pounding with fear and adrenaline. As the years passed, I often wondered about that fateful night. Had Mr. Harrington truly been a malevolent spirit, or had he been a vessel for the true evil that dwelled within his house? I may never know the answer, but one thing is certain. I will never forget the horrors I witnessed in the house next door, and the whispering shadows that still haunt my nightmares to this day. I moved into a quiet suburban neighborhood when I was 13 years old. It was a quaint place, with charming houses, friendly neighbors, and a sense of security that only small towns can offer. But there was one house that always sent shivers down my spine, the old Victorian mansion next door. It was a looming presence, shadowed by overgrown trees and vines. The paint was peeling, and the windows were cracked, giving it an eerie, abandoned look. But the creepiest part of all was my neighbor, Mr. Jameson, the man who lived there. Mr. Jameson was a recluse. No one ever saw him outside his house, and he never acknowledged anyone's presence, not even with a simple nod. Rumors swirled around him like a dark cloud. Some said he was a war veteran who had gone mad, while others claimed he practiced black magic. I didn't know what to believe, but I couldn't help feeling a sense of unease whenever I passed his house. One chilly October evening, my curiosity got the better of me. I decided to investigate the abandoned house next door. Armed with a flashlight and my best friend, Charlie, we crept through the overgrown yard and up the creaking porch steps. The air was thick with a sense of foreboding as we pushed the front door open. Inside, the house was a time capsule of the past. Dust-covered furniture and cobwebs adorned every corner. The air was stale and heavy, making it hard to breathe. We cautiously made our way through the darkened rooms, our flashlights cutting through the darkness like knives. As we reached the second floor, we heard a faint whisper, like the rustle of leaves in the wind. We froze, our hearts pounding. It was then that I noticed a faint light emanating from a room at the end of the hallway. We exchanged nervous glances and moved closer. The room was unlike the rest of the house. It was pristine, as though it had been frozen in time. A single candle flickered on a dusty table, casting eerie shadows on the walls. In the center of the room stood a mirror, ornate and imposing. It seemed out of place in the dilapidated house. I couldn't resist the urge to touch it. My fingers brushed the cold surface, and a chill ran down my spine. That's when I saw it in the reflection, a figure standing behind us in the doorway. It was Mr. Jameson, but he looked different, otherworldly. His eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and his lips curled into a sinister smile. Without a word, he raised his hand, and a gust of wind swept through the room, extinguishing the candle. The darkness enveloped us, and I could hear Charlie's panicked breathing beside me. We fumbled for our flashlights, but they refused to turn on. In the pitch-black darkness, I felt a presence moving closer, the sound of ghostly whispers filling my ears. I reached out for Charlie's hand, but he wasn't there. I was alone in the suffocating darkness. Panic set in as I stumbled blindly through the house, searching for an escape. The whispers grew louder and the air grew colder. I felt a hand on my shoulder, icy and skeletal. It sent a shockwave of terror through me and I screamed. Suddenly, the lights flickered to life, and I found myself back in the room with the mirror. But this time, I was alone. The room had returned to its dusty, abandoned state, and Mr. Jameson was nowhere to be seen. I rushed out of the house and found Charlie waiting on the porch, his face as pale as mine. We never spoke of that night again, but we both knew we had encountered something beyond our understanding. Over the years, I kept my distance from Mr. Jameson and his mysterious house. The whispers and rumors persisted, but I knew the truth. There was something malevolent dwelling in that old Victorian mansion. As I grew older and moved away from the neighborhood, the memories of that night faded, but I could never shake the feeling that Mr. Jameson and his haunted house held secrets that were better left undisturbed. The eerie encounter had left an indelible mark on my soul, a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying horrors are the ones that lurk just beyond our understanding, waiting to be discovered in the darkest corners of our world.